Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Fourmation Podcast. We are now on to episode 36 and my word, hasn't it been a good week? So obviously video watchers and as may have seen, and obviously the audio listeners will have winced at the prospect of my voice. Football, in a week where football is coming home, one person is not. George has gone away on a little staycation. He's joined Harry in that little exclusive club of members that have decided that the podcast is second to a holiday. But in its place, we've got a friend of the podcast and also a fellow housemate of us four. Josh, how are you doing?
Hello, boys. Yeah, I'm doing well, thanks, mate. Looking forward to this.
I suppose now this is your second cap for the formation.
Well,
yeah,
third,
I'm building them up.
He was on that random preview we did for
Right,
Dortmund.
So, either way, we've also got Sam. Monday was superb, but Tuesday must have edged that. How good was it?
Oh yeah, I couldn't get enough of football over that time period. Two brilliant games on that Monday, like you say, and then England getting that historic victory over Germany, finally getting redemption over the Germans, which is good. So yeah, and can't get enough of the football. Can't wait for the quarterfinals to start as well.
And also Harry's here. Obviously, watching on Tuesday night, did your J2Os get a little bit stronger when the second goal in? Because I know my dark fruits turned into calling Premier, and if you've not had that, it probably knocks you out quicker than Scotland.
No, I stuck with the J2Os, but I had two bottles rather than one. I was pushing the boat out because it was a special afternoon, and we absolutely loved it, all of us. So yeah, it was fantastic.
Christmas tried to pin you down with that much sugar. Basically, what we're going to do now is go through the whole of the round of 16 and previewing the quarterfinals. If you want to complain at the kind of aspect and order that we've got, blame George. He wanted to do it in the tournament tree last week, so I thought I'd honour that today in his absence. So starting off, Italy 2-1 Austria. It took Italy 120 minutes to see off the resilient Austria. Many people would have thought that Italy would have just brushed aside Austria, but that wasn't the case, was it, Sam?
No, Italy were quite lacklustre, to be fair, for the majority of the game. It was only until Roberto Mancini made those key subs, Chiesa and Pessina, who ended up scoring the goals in the space of 10 minutes, which obviously won the game for Italy in the end after it being 0-0 after 90 minutes. So I think Austria were pretty good. They pressed high like Italy have done in their previous games, and they defended really well, really resiliently, and they were just pretty unlucky in the end. They obviously had the disallowed goal and things like that, which some things that didn't go their way, but they really held themselves to a good account, and Italy, for the first time in this tournament, showed some weaknesses. So I think that'll be an encouragement to obviously Belgium, who they're facing next, which will be an even harder game. So they came through in the end, and they showed that other side to their game. They showed that they can grind out results like the Italy sides of old. So you can take the positives and negatives from it from an Italy perspective.
If you cast your mind back, Harry, from when we reviewed the Juventus versus Porto tie in the Champions League, Federico Chiesa was one that really stood out in that match, despite being on the losing side. He had 26 goal involvements last season for Juventus and 3 appearances for Fiorentina just before that. Is it a surprise that we haven't seen more of his talents, obviously getting the opener on Saturday?
If Italy weren't so dominant in at least their opening 2 games and got over the line against Wales, I'd probably say so. But 2 3-0 victories and a good win against Wales means that if it's a winning system, there's no need to change it. But from Italy's point of view, a big reason that they won the game way back in the day, that it was because of their squad depth against Austria. You've got to say, even though it was Italy, the teams were quite level in the 19 minutes, and it was Pessina and Chiesa that changed the game off the bench in extra time. But yeah, if we talk about the 26 goal involvement specifically, it's a bit of a surprise that we've not seen him. But if there's a winning system, what's the need to change it?
Josh, we've already talked a little bit how good Italy have been, and obviously 3 convincing wins out of 3 so far. Do you think their sort of struggles will give confidence to Belgium, especially with Belgium's attacking talents?
Well, I think it's more about how Italy will pick themselves up, really. Obviously, Belgium will look at that and think we can do a number on them here after they beat Portugal, who were debatably one of the biggest sides in the tournament. But it's about how Italy will bounce back and come back from what's realistically one of their worst performances this tournament, if not the worst, and then make sure that they can capitalise on it and bring something better to the table against Belgium, because they're going to need it.
Do you think, in a way, that Italy probably needed some kind of presence on their defence to sort of adapt in this tournament, Josh?
Yeah, it's a sort of reality check. I can't remember exactly how long it had been since they'd last conceded, but they've been clean sheet after clean sheet. And so to have some sort of exposure at the back where you can see, right, this is where we're going wrong, this needs to improve, then that can only do them a world of good, really.
Sam, before we move on to how Belgium progressed to meet Italy in the quarterfinals, a word on Austria. A slow start in the overall tournament, but will they be happy with how they bowed out?
Yeah, like I say, they represented themselves well in that game, and defensively they were brilliant. I think they really challenged an Italy team who've been absolutely brilliant attacking wise in the group stage. I think they scored 8, and obviously going into the game, Italy were on a 30-game unbeaten run, stretching that to 31 in the end. But I think Austria represented themselves really well in that game, and the usual suspects, Alaba, Sabitzer, Arnautovic had a good game as well. They all played pretty well in the end. Just the quality of Italy won out. The squad depth that they have coming off the bench, like I say, those substitutions really changed the game in extra time. So unlucky for them in the end.
I do think, though, that with Austria, they've now set out a rose map, sort of how Hungary did. You know, they drew against France in the group and they drew against Germany. They've set out a rose map. If you're the underdog coming against, Belgium aren't the underdog, but maybe a different team, or the way they defensively set up. They really struggled, Italy, to break Austria down. And people are going to look at how Austria played and copy it slightly. Because if it's worked, at least for the first 90 minutes, why not? You know?
Well, moving on to the next bracket of that little tournament tree, Belgium 1-0 Portugal. There was huge anticipation going into this fixture. I think definitely not me predicted that it'd finish something like 4-3, but it arguably didn't. It failed to live up to expectation, didn't it, Sam?
Picked the wrong game of that prediction. There were a few of those high scoring bouts, but yeah, it was. I think the first half was extremely cagey, and then once Belgium got the goal, it was a lot of defending from them. They showed there's some question marks over Belgium going into the tournament. Obviously, they've got loads of attacking talent, Lukaku, De Bruyne, the Hazards, but there's a few question marks over the defence, a very ageing defence. Thomas Vermaelen, Toby Alderweireld, Jan Vertonghen, all in their 30s, creeping up to their late 30s, but they showed that they have they showed that side to the game a lot in the second half, keeping up Portugal, who were bombarding their goal in the second half, and Courtois was brilliant as well. It was a quiet game for Lukaku, only touched the ball 30 times, but in the end, their defence won out against Portugal, who were frustrated in the end.
You mentioned Belgium's attacking talents. Obviously, Portugal have got an abundance of talent going forward, but they played rather conservative from the off, and that probably cost them a little bit. Do you think they've just not found a balance in their side, Harry?
Yeah, I think that's the struggle. When you've got so many cooks in the attacking unit, it's about how to select, who to select. You know, Bruno Fernandes was absent for, the second half of Portugal's tournament because they couldn't get the best out of him. And to be honest, I think the main reason they even started to get chances, I think they ended up with a 1.3 or 1.4 XG compared to Belgium's 0.2. But the main reason why they got those chances is because in the last 20 minutes, Belgium were like, right, let's keep this 1-0 lead. Let's get all the men behind the ball, keep Lukaku and Carrasco for the counter-attack, which they messed up continuously and really could have lost 2 or 3-0. And that's why they got most of their chances. They really should have scored with the header. It's completely lost me who was that header. It might have been Ruben Diaz. Was it Diaz with the header that went straight at Courtois, and then Guerrero that hit the post? They got those chances because Belgium sort of let them onto them to try and counter-attack them. And I think Portugal will be disappointed with that performance. They really will.
Josh, I'd like to bring in your knowledge of the Bundesliga here. Obviously, you've got the Dortmund shirt on now, but Eden Hazard showed flashes of his former self in the game, but it was his brother that really, his brothers really came into his own, and Torgan Hazard was the difference on the day, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was, definitely. Obviously, he got the important goal that won the game. It was a brilliant strike too. I've always been an advocate for Torgan Hazard, and so for that to come through, I was a little bit smug, I must admit. But yeah, no, I think he's a really good player, and I think he was the best on the pitch on the day by a long, long way.
So before we get into some predictions, because if I tried to avoid that, George would somehow find his way up to Worksop and get me. But we've mentioned how Belgium may have taken a little bit of confidence in Italy's showing, but especially towards the end of the game, surely Italy will now look at Belgium's high line and ageing defence and be licking their lips, Sam.
Yeah, this is a really interesting tie between two teams who are obviously in red hot form, but stumbled a little bit in stages at the tournament. Like I say, Italy now 31 games unbeaten. Both teams have not lost in all their 14 games during this tournament, including the qualifiers. So it'll be really interesting to see. You mentioned the Asian defence there, but they had a really good display against Portugal, and they'll take a lot of confidence from that, keeping the clean sheet, keeping all those attacking players out like Ronaldo, Bernardo Silva, Diogo Jota and players like that, keeping them out. They'll take confidence from that. Obviously, they're going up against an equally potent attack with Lukaku in the form he's in at the moment. So it'll be really interesting. I think it's hard to predict. I think they're, like I say, both teams in great form. So, and we've seen it's dangerous making predictions during this tournament, as we've seen with some of the games in the round of 16.
And with that said, then this could either go two ways. Attacking talents or defensive conservative. Let's go for some predictions then. Harry, let's start with you.
You know what? I'm going to go 2-1 to Italy. You know, they have seen their defence falter against Austria, but I think their attacking talents are enough to get past Belgium, who are relatively inexperienced in this level, at least to win these sort of games. So I'm going to go 2-1 to the Italians.
Sam?
I'm going to flip Harry's score and go 2-1 Belgium, I think. I think the frailties that Italy showed against Austria might rear their head again, and I think Lukaku will definitely have a better game, or at least I'm expecting him to have a better game than he did against Portugal.
Josh?
I'd have to agree with Harry. I'm going to go 2-1 Italy. I don't think Belgium have proven themselves against big teams. Obviously, they got to the semi-finals of the World Cup in 2018, but I just don't think they've had enough of these pressured games against teams who are in great form. And I mean, Italy, you've got to fancy them to win the whole thing at the moment. So 2-1, definitely, I think they'll pick themselves back up.
I'm going to go out and say that Italy will win this 3-1, and Donnarumma will have a fantastic game after being bombarded early, but Italy's strength going forward. You know, I'm a big fan of them. Right, the next part of the tournament tree Caesars review, Monday night's game. So we had 14 goals in that one day, and absolutely incredible. Let's start with France 3-3 Switzerland. Obviously, Switzerland going through 5-4 on penalties. Josh, France were the favourites. It was a huge shock, and you probably feel like with the talents that France possess, the tournament was theirs to win. But Didier Deschamps, arguably the one to blame because of the formation change so late on. It really seemed to distort them, didn't it?
100%. They've underperformed all tournament. That could be down to the meddling of the formation, and that could also be put down to the Giroud and Mbappe feud earlier this month. Well, last month now. Yeah, you would have fancied them, but as soon as they went one down, they just looked completely rocked. And it wasn't until Rodriguez missed the penalty that they seemed to think, hold on, we could do something here. We're still in this. So, yeah, France were poor, really, until the second half.
Sam, obviously one person has to miss in the penalty shootout, and that fell to Kylian Mbappe's feet. Unfortunately, he'll be massively disappointed with his showing at this tournament, won't he?
Yeah, especially off the back of the massive influence that he had in France's World Cup win 3 years ago. And he missed a couple of big chances during the game as well, which obviously must have knocked his confidence a bit, because as he was stepping up for the penalty, I don't know about you guys, but I had that feeling that he was going to miss when it came up to it. Obviously, he probably wanted to take that penalty because he thought it might have been the winning one, but it ended up being the one that lost in the game. And it just put a cap on what's been a disappointing tournament for him. And like Josh says, a disappointing tournament for the team as a whole. And Deschamps, like you say, will have his head in his hands over going to the 3-man defence, which has obviously been a popular system in this tournament. But I guess the injuries to his 2 left backs obviously affected that. But to make a change going into this big knockout game, it's probably not the right move to unsettle the team a little bit. They almost clawed through with the quality that they have, obviously carrying Benzema scoring those 2 brilliant goals. And Paul Pogba as well. You have to mention that one. What a fantastic goal that was. He's had a pretty good tournament, but in the end, the change in system and Switzerland's resilience and fight and hunger as a team won out.
Yeah, as soon as they changed it from a back, back to a back 4, they seemed to sort of have a little bit of control. Obviously, the goals came at a crucial time, but they just switched off in the end. And you'd probably argue that it had been a case that France probably thought they was already in the quarterfinals, but Switzerland's resilience saw them through.
Granit Xhaka had the game of his life as well. Some of the passes he was spraying about, Jesus.
Yeah,
Arsenal fans would have been wondering where that's been the whole time that he's been at the club. But there you go.
I suppose these tournaments see people step up a little bit like Paul Pogba did. Harry, how did Switzerland overcome this supposed powerhouse?
I just think it's the absolute mental resilience. I think they saw early in the day, even though Croatia didn't win, they were 3-1 down with 5 minutes ago, Croatia that was, and they were able to battle back. But I think, well, obviously, I don't have to think it. Switzerland fought so much harder. They went 1-0 up, deservedly so as well. But when they got that penalty, I was ready to come onto this podcast and absolutely slate Rodriguez. And saying that, I probably am now. Because I know they did win the end, but if you've missed your last 2 penalties, put your ego to the side, get someone else to take the penalties, more confident or has a better record than you, slot that home, 2-0, it's game over. Thankfully, their resilience was, it was absolutely phenomenal. Apart from France's 20 minutes where they just absolutely bombarded the Swiss goal and went 3-1 up. Those 2 goals right at the end for Switzerland, I thought the game was over. I thought it was absolutely over. I was ready to go out. I was ready. I had the shorts on, ready to leave the house. And then right at the last minute, they get the goal. And yeah, I think as much as it was Switzerland being fantastic, and they definitely were, taking off Benzema, taking off Griezmann. I know they took off Benzema in the 94th minute, so an extra time, but taking off Griezmann for Sissoko to try and solidify the game, that's an attacking talent that you would really need an extra time. And at that point, apart from Mbappe's chance where he pretended to be injured to sort of not look as embarrassed, they really didn't create too much after that substitution. So yeah, I think it was certainly a bit of both, but you can't take anything away from Switzerland. And one other thing, the quality of the Swiss penalties, apart from that one where Lloris definitely should have done better, was absolutely unbelievable. And I think penalties nowadays are getting so much better because people are practicing them because they're just anticipating that penalty shootout's going to come. And looking at the quality of every single player from centre back to striker to defensive midfielder, they're just fantastic. Every single one, really, apart from Mbappe's.
That might have played into Mbappe's psyche in the end, seeing all those penalties flying into the top corner, especially Paul Pogba's. I think that was I don't think that penalty could have been any better. It was just right in the corner, just a brilliant penalty in the end. And another thing that disappointed me about France in that game was the lack of aerial presence for Switzerland's first 2 goals, especially Seferovic's headers, just completely unmarked for both of them. And that just really summed up the game for them. Defensively poor throughout.
I suppose, Josh, with Sam mentioning Seferovic, the sort of attitudes around him have painted a picture of him being really poor, but in this tournament he's shown that actually he can be a good centre forward.
Yeah, I mean, this tournament's throwing up a lot of surprises, isn't it? And this just adds to it. He's on fire at the moment. Not going to sit here and say that he's a shout for the Golden Boot, but he's doing better than a lot of people would have expected, and he's doing a better job than a lot of other players that people would have thought would do better than him. So no, it's a good thing to work from a Swiss point of view. They've got a player to focus around, and they've got someone who will score goals.
Moving on then, and we want some more goals, so we're going to give it you. Croatia 3-5 Spain, AET. It went to extra time, obviously, and what a fantastic game, Harry.
Absolutely unbelievable. I mean, it wasn't quite as good as the Swiss one. I mean, a lot of people seeing that game thought that's game of the tournament, game over, finished. No one's going to beat that. And then, the Swiss-France game comes up. But like I said, Spain, they look very comfortable with just a few minutes to go. And Croatia go, you know what, they just throw the kitchen sink at them. And 2 goals in the last 5 minutes is absolutely unbelievable. I think that's the second top goal-scoring game since the first ever Euros game that finished 5-4. Since the first ever game, there's not been one that's come close. Until this one, then, blimey, yeah. Croatia couldn't quite get over the line, but it's a great effort from them. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I think that game you mentioned, was it France versus Yugoslavia or something?
Something like that, yeah.
You boys will probably say, "Oh, weren't you there in attendance?" But no, not at all. But obviously, you have to start with 1 goal, and unfortunately, with the result aside, it wasn't a nice one for you, nice Simon, wasn't it, Josh? No,
not at all. I'm not quite sure who it was put down. I think it's Pedri's own goal that's gone down as. Yeah. But God, that's your nightmare, isn't it? To do that so early in a huge game, that's just awful. It's poor. But I mean, it didn't matter in the end, did it?
No, in fact, he actually came up trumps in the end, didn't he? With a fantastic save in extra time.
Yeah, he absolutely made up for it. So props to him.
Sam, it was an interesting game, and obviously, how will Spain take this game, sort of? Because in times their ball retention and going forward, they looked absolutely unplayable, but they showed the frailties because they allowed Croatia in too many times, and the Croatians had many shots.
Yeah, it's a weird one with Spain because the first 2 games, scoring goals is their problem. I mean, they dominated the ball, like you say, and scoring goal, they weren't bad at creating chances. It was just converting those chances into goals. Morata especially, but he got on the score sheet in this game, obviously, so that'll be big for him. Luis Enrique showing a lot of confidence in him, but like you say, they'll need to tighten up defensively. Like we said, the same about Netherlands in the group stage. They needed to tighten up defensively going into the knockout stages, and that ended up being their undoing in that game, which we'll obviously get into in a bit. So like you say, the defence is so important. Seen in that Belgium game against Portugal, the defence won the game for them. They can continue to outscore teams, but I don't think that'll work throughout. So yeah, like you say, probably need to shore up defensively.
Well, after that game, will we see anything like the last 2 games we've described in the next round? Obviously, these 2 will meet. Josh, prediction, Switzerland versus Spain.
Well, see, I'd like to count Switzerland out already, but they've already shown that you just can't. But I think Spain will come through, even though they have been, well, I say they've been struggling to score. Obviously, they put 5 in last time, but I'm going to have to say 1-0 Spain, I think.
Harry?
Do you know what?
Here we go. This is setting up for a Harry.
I mean, to be fair, I said Wales are going to win. We'll get onto that later. I said that Scotland are going to do well. They got knocked out. I said we get out of the round of 16. That doesn't happen. So whatever I say, it's not going to happen. It seems like. But I'm going to go Switzerland 2-1. I don't think Spain will be able to deal with the looping balls into Seferovic's head. Hopefully, from a Swiss point of view, Morata, it was a fantastic finish in extra time. Let's be honest. That finish into the roof of the net was phenomenal. But I think Spain might have run out of goals. They scored 10 in their last 2. That's going to be it for the tournament, and they're going to lose. Well, apart from the one that I believe they're going to get. And I'm going to say Switzerland are going to win 2-1.
Sam?
This game's probably set up for a 0-0 straight up to penalties, considering the last 2 the 2 games these teams were involved in last. But I'm going to go for more goals. I'm going to go Spain 3-2.
Well, I'm going to go opposite that. I think Switzerland will take how Poland and Sweden sort of kept Spain and nullified them well. And I'm going to go for Switzerland 1, Spain 0. Wales 0 for Denmark. A spirited performance for the Danes. A fantastic victory, obviously. Josh, going into this game, you wouldn't have predicted probably this outcome and how dominant Denmark were, but it didn't flatter them. They were just, how good were they?
I mean, they were superb, weren't they? Obviously, 1-0 at half time. It could have gone either way then, but the second half they came out, flew out of the blocks and put another 3 past them. Denmark, I think the whole situation, as awful as it was with Christian Eriksen, that's brought them closer as a team, and they just look like they are one player pretty much. They're all just together, and that togetherness is just doing them so many favours, I should say. And I mean, Wales just didn't have an answer.
That brings me on to my next question for Samuel. Obviously, Eriksen's absence has obviously it's brought on it were a traumatic experience, and you could probably have excused them for going out after 2 defeats in the group stage, but they are using that situation sort of just to force them through whenever you're feeling it a little bit in your legs. You put in that extra 10%, and they're not even playing around where the position where Eriksen would be. They are just continuing with your style, and how far can they go?
Yeah, I think they're the first team to regress from the groups in Euros history, having lost their first 2. And like you said, like Josh mentioned there, that incident would have rocked them, but it has brought them closer as a team. And to be fair to Mikkel Damsgaard, the young man who's come in to replace him, really, he's been absolutely brilliant. 7 goals in his last 6 appearances for the Danes now in all comps. And he's just been yet another brilliant game against Wales. Obviously, Kasper Dolberg with the 2 goals, and Joachim Mæhle, the wing back. He's been brilliant in the Russia game and this one against Wales. I think Wales started the game well. Gareth Bale was looking his usual dangerous self on the right-hand side, cutting inside in his left foot, as he likes to do, causing a few problems. But as soon as the first goal went in, it was just all Denmark, and they were just, as they were against Russia, just absolutely punished Wales. So much energy, so much intensity in the press and going forward in transition with the ball. And they look really good. They look a real threat, and they could be a big surprise of this tournament.
As Sam mentioned, Kasper Dolberg getting the double, obviously around 4 or 5 years ago, he was linked with, saying this lad's the bee's knees. I think when they lost to United in the Europa League final, it was getting linked with big moves. However, his career's not sort of turned out that way. And Josh, as we mentioned earlier, Severovic, obviously another double in the round of 16, but it is shaping up to have that similar trend.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's an absolute shoe in on my Football Manager saves. But, I mean, this tournament, again, throwing up all sorts of surprises. And we see from these major tournaments that's where a player's born, pretty much. That's where big moves come from. Obviously, it's on this time the continental stage. A lot of people are going to be seeing it. A lot of clubs are going to be seeing him just hitting the back of the net constantly. And there could be a move in the works for him. There could be something. Yeah, you saw it with James Rodriguez. Goes into that as a sort of nobody, comes out with a big move.
I'm going to take offence to that because my 2014 World Cup fantasy football, I put James Rodriguez in there because I signed him on FIFA and he was good, so I put him in. But,
you discovered him, basically. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
I think that is one of the most wild claims we've ever had on the podcast.
He rings me every week and says, "Oh, thank you for that." I'm like, "No, you stick to playing with Rafa now." Anyway, on the flip side, before we spark any controversial opinions from over at Stanley Park, Harry, what went wrong for Wales? You obviously had high hopes for them.
Yeah, I thought they had this, not as strong as Denmark because of the occurrences that happened during the tournament, but I thought they had a similar team mentality, and they probably do. But Gareth Bale had a bright opening 10 minutes. That shot that just whistled past the post. It's always going wide, but it shows what he's about. And Denmark just muted their biggest threat. They didn't really create anything after that, really. Kiefer Moore got muted by the tall Danish defence. His aerial abilities weren't able to get utilised. And, you look at the first goal, it's a great finish. You look at the second goal, maybe it should have been a foul in the build-up. But Nico Williams has to do better with the clearance. He clears it straight to Dolberg, who just smashes it in the back of the net. And at that point, when Wales have created absolutely nothing, I know Switzerland and Croatia got back into the games, the few days afterwards, but they actually showed something before. Whereas I feel like Wales, apart from that opening 10-minute exchange, they didn't really do anything. I don't think they had any belief that they'd get back in the game either. Their mental strength wasn't there compared to the Denmark's mental strength that was through the roof. And I think that was the difference, really, and they just let them come onto them. Don't worry, when it's at 4-0, I don't think the Harry Wilson red card was a red card. It was just a sad end to a tournament for Wales where they had quite a lot of hope. If they beat Denmark, they would have played the Czech Republic. If they beat them, they probably would have faced us. And then at that game, it's a 50-50, really, in a semi-final and a knockout game, but they just couldn't get past the Danish hurdle.
Wales looked tired in the end. I think all the travelling they've had to do surely has played a factor in that. Having played 2 games in Baku and then Rome and then to Amsterdam for this one, that can't have helped them.
With them factors in mind then, Sam, and obviously the controversy around Ryan Giggs before the tournament, will Rob Page be happy with his overall assessment of his campaign?
I think they can definitely take some positives, some things to build on for them in this tournament. Getting out the groups is probably better than I expect them to do, probably. I think they have a lot of good young players who have a bright future. They just need to get in, feature more for their clubs. A few of those players like Nico Williams, like you say, had a poor game in the end. But if they get more experience to their clubs over the next year, they can have a good go of this World Cup qualification campaign. It looks like Gareth Bale is sticking around for this tournament at least. So there are definitely some positives to take. I think that game against Turkey showed that they have some quality, they have some resilience, they have some of that team spirit that they captured in the 2016 tournament. So yeah, definitely some positives. It's not the way they wanted the tournament to end, but a decent run for them.
Netherlands 0. I really said 2 then. 0 to Czech Republic. Harry, a shock.
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly a shock. I think a lot of people, especially me, from Holland's dominant display in the group stage, I know that they should have been beating the teams that they were beating, but they still had to do it, and they went and did it. Especially, remember that Ukraine game where they made loads of substitutions, lost the 2-goal lead, and then fought back to win 3-2. And I thought it'd be the same. Wijnaldum was on fire, Dumfries during the group stage was fantastic, and Depay was brilliant. But I think I saw a stat somewhere why Wijnaldum completed 10 passes in the entire game. That their team was just not great. Don't get me wrong, if Malen scores that goal when he's 1-on-1, if he doesn't try and round the keeper or does it successfully, takes a shot, he scores. And then I think it was something like 120 seconds after that, or something ridiculous. It might have been even less. It might have been about 30. The De Ligt red card happens, and at that point, the game completely gets flipped on its head. Not Denmark, trying to call them Denmark. Holland just go right into their shell, and 13 minutes later, Czech Republic get a deserved first, and they did the smart thing. They didn't sit off of them and let Holland try and attack them to keep the 1-0 lead. They kept going. And as much as it's quite an obvious thing to say, if they keep attacking and don't let Holland out their own half, Holland can't go and score. They can't because there's so much pressure on them. And that's how Patrick Schick, who's had a fantastic tournament, got his second goal. And at that point, it's absolutely game over. And Frank de Boer, I think he's already left or got sacked. I can't remember which one it is. And rightly so, because that's a game that they've got to be winning. And I know the De Ligt red card changed it, but maybe before that, they should be 1-0 up against the Czech Republic side that are the underdogs, but should be beaten by the Netherlands.
As Harry said there, the obviously changing point was on that 51st minute mark. De Ligt's red card came after. So Sam, was it a red card? Probably, but more importantly, Malen misses that chance, but they had a host of chances in that first half, and especially at tournaments, it's such fine margins. You've got to be putting them chances away, Sam.
Yeah, the 2 wing backs, Denzel Dumfries, has caused a lot of problems on the attacking end in the group stage. He had one I think Patrick Van Aanholt had one as well where he just completely got it wrong. So that, like you say, you have to take it in the tournament situation, a high pressure knockout game. You have to be taking these chances, making use of your dominance when you're on top and capitalizing. But like you say, that De Ligt incident, that was definitely a red card, a poor mistake from him. He's had a bit of a tough time since his move to Juventus, really. A lot of expectation on the young man, considering the performances he put in for Ajax. Is it, becoming the captain so early in his career, and just a poor error for him, really. He said, I think he said after the game that he shouldn't have let the ball bounce straight from the keeper's kick. He should have just dealt with it early, and in the end, the slip, he did what he did. He probably shouldn't have done it. He probably should have let shit go through on goal and deal with the consequences. At least Holland would have had 11 men on the pitch still to come back into the game, and that, like he said after the game, that mistake has really cost them in the end.
I think, considering how quickly that all happened, that's got to have a huge effect psychologically on the rest of the team, because you've gone from, I'm not going to say they were on the front foot, but they should have scored, as I'm sure we all agreed. That should have gone in. And then within a minute, you've gone from, you should have scored, you should be leading in a high pressure game, to we've got 10 men and we're under the cosh a bit now. And so for the rest of the players on the field, obviously De Ligt's going to be gutted, but he left himself with very little to do by being so conservative with getting rid, and of course the slip as well. But for the rest of the 10 players on the field, they've got to be thinking, well, what the hell are we supposed to do now? We should be leading, and now there's 10 of us. Like, and that didn't leave them with much chance, and obviously that's when the goals started coming.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the Czech were offered that olive branch, and they certainly took it, Josh.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, you need to have shots to score goals, obviously. Well, not in Pedri's case, but I mean, Netherlands didn't even have a shot on target. They were poor going forward. Again, they should have scored that, but they didn't. But then they never bounced back, and as soon as Czech Republic scored once, it looked over. As soon as that first goal went in, it was over. It was game over. The fans were dejected. Obviously, not the Czech Republic fans, and Netherlands looked rushed, and they had no clue what they were doing. It was a panic situation. I guess it's one they're not going to find themselves in often. But these sort of games, you have to come up with the goods somehow.
Yeah, it's a good learning experience. A lot of young players in the team, but they just, when they went down to 10, they needed to keep the ball better. Like Harry said, Wijnaldum only completing 10 passes. That's really poor from your talisman, someone who's been so important to Netherlands' success so far in the tournament. So they needed to keep the ball better, calm the game down, slow down the tempo, and try and work their way from there. But they just didn't do that and let all the pressure come onto themselves, and that lost them the game.
Overall, now going into that quarterfinal, it's certainly going to be an interesting watch, Harry. It's one that's hard to call now.
And that's the exact thing. I can't call it. I think the Czech Republic have been very impressive. I think Denmark, after those two original losses of the tournament, have been fantastic. And they both got those little key players throughout the squad. You know, Patrick Schick for the Czech Republic, as well as Kufal. You've got Soinchek as well. But then you look at Denmark, they've got talent all over, littered through the squad in their defence, in their midfield, in their attack. So I'm just going to go with a boring 1-1 and it's get sorted out on penalties. I can't call it within the original 90 or 120 minutes.
And Josh, let's have a prediction from you.
See, I'd like to say the same. If only they could draw this game, that would be brilliant for me. I wouldn't have to put my eggs in any basket. But I'd agree with Harry that I think it's going to be a score draw. I couldn't possibly put a number to that score. You got obviously Czech Republic in good form, whereas Denmark are the only team at the Euros to have had 6 shots or more on target every game so far they've played.
Wow.
So they're averaging 7.3 shots on target for the tournament.
So it's two teams that absolutely aren't shy in front of goal. So there will be goals. I hope that doesn't come back to bite me. But
it always does, as we've learned.
Yeah, I think it's going to be decided on penalties, and I mean, it's anyone's game there. It's a lottery, really. So,
Sam, will it be a Great Dane, or will Brad Cox's prediction of Czech Republic going far in the competition ensue?
I think Denmark are carrying so much momentum into this game with the last two games that they've had, high scoring, like you say, and I think that they'll just have too much for the Czechs in the end. They'll use that high pressing and high intensity style that they've used to great success in those last two games, like I say, and I think they'll win 2-0.
I'm going to go on a limb here and say that Denmark will come in all guns blazing. The Czechs will defend resolutely, and the Czech Republic will go through 2-0 victors. Now, I suppose we've got something in the country that we need to mention, something we need to shout from the rooftops. I can't think of anything. England 2-0 Germany. Gareth Southgate received a lot of criticism when them lineups were announced, but he certainly silenced them, didn't he?
Most certainly, I was one of them, sat in the golf range. I think I was just angry at the fact that I couldn't hit a ball to save my life, clubbing it about. But I wasn't too impressed. But he played it tactically phenomenally well, getting a good 2-0 one. Is that the first time in knockout since 1966, that famous day where we beat Germany, that we've been victors against them? And yeah, we controlled the majority of the game. Don't get me wrong, Werner had a couple of chances. Müller really should have scored, and I bet someone's going to mention that a bit later. But you know, we fully deserved the victory. Don't get me wrong. I was sat in the garden watching it in a fellow garden, just a couple behind me. There were fireworks going off. It's a bit premature. Let's beat Ukraine before we let any of those off, or hopefully win the final. But we'll see. But yeah, I think Southgate's proved a lot of people, including myself, wrong. You know, I thought when we come up against a big team, we're going to become unstuck. Yes, I know Germany aren't the team that won the World Cup, and they haven't been brilliant in recent years, but they still got the players. They still got out the group of death. And, you know, they got absolutely controlled. They got nullified despite that one chance that I mentioned. And yeah, we fully deserved it.
You mentioned the chance to save my running order. We'll save that for a little bit later. Obviously, in the build-up to the tournament, there was a lot in favour of picking Nick Pope over Jordan Pickford, but Pickford's saves from Werner and Havertz, especially in the first half, kept England in it when they were trying to be more conservative. Josh, just how good has Pickford been, not only in that game, but the whole tournament?
Oh, superb. I mean, throughout the season in the Premier League, I've been critical of Pickford. I'm not his biggest fan by any means, but this tournament, he's been absolutely fantastic. He's really turned up. Some of the saves against Scotland, he only made 3 saves before the Germany game this entire tournament, but they've all been crucial. And you look at the saves against Germany, and he was the reason we stayed in the game. We weren't punished enough because Pickford was absolutely on the ball.
And Sam, obviously Southgate beforehand used the inspiration of John Barnes. We held, we gave, and we did it at the right time. Obviously, 69 minutes in, Jack Grealish was introduced, had a direct hand in both goals. Obviously, played it to Luke Shaw first for his assist to Raheem Sterling before actually putting it on a plate for Harry Kane to get his opening goal of the tournament. Overall, he didn't. I think the game as a whole was changing anyway in favour of England, but he certainly helped to advance that, didn't he?
Yeah, shock. I don't think many people were surprised when Jack Grealish came on. The game changed. I mean, that's no discredit to Bukayo Saka, who came off of Grealish. I think Saka was the bright spark in the first half, and he got us into gear when we started the game really poorly in the first 10 minutes. Germany were all over us to start with, and he, with his ball carries, got us into the game a bit more, and he did his service, and then Grealish came on and was the inspiration. That was a big move Southgate to make, and a good one, switching Sterling to the right-hand side, and Grealish on the left got in, cut inside a bit more, and allowed Luke Shaw to bomb forward, which he did for both goals. And him, Harry Kane, and Luke Shaw, like I mentioned, they all linked up for both goals. So that was the key change in the game. That was the key moment that switched the game in our favour.
And I suppose it was another key moment in there, and Harry's already alluded to it. Could have been very different if Muller had scored that, Harry.
Yeah, I mean, I think many people, including myself, expected him to score it. It seemed like he had absolutely ages to pick his spot. And a lot of the time, that's the problem. A lot of players work well with snapshots, coming across the box, no time to think, bang, goal. Whereas it felt like, he had almost an entire half that he ran to get to Pickford's goal, trying to think to pick his spot. And there was that beautiful angle behind the goal. Behind the play of the Germany fans starting to celebrate. And then they just see it just go wide of the post, and they just absolutely head in their hands, because you always think when he goes through on goal, he's going to equalise, and then possibly the game changes from that point. Momentum's in Germany's favour. We've just conceded for making a mistake, and they go on the front foot. Whereas in actual fact, it flips on its head once again, because we're going, yes, we've got lucky off of that one. Maybe the luck's on our side in this tournament rather than against us. And Germany think, blimey, we're not going to get a better chance than that. And that's exactly how it worked out.
I suppose that chance also sort of personified Germany's performances in this World Cup. They've been rather hit and miss. Obviously, the win against Portugal was a good one, but the other two games, they just didn't really look convincing. Josh, why hasn't it worked out for them?
I can't quite put my finger on it, in honesty. I mean, you look at the Hungary game, of course, drew 2-2. There was times where they just froze in defence. They were just completely at sea. It was almost as if there was no communication. They were sort of looking at each other going, well, you get the ball. And so I guess that's going to have a big effect on it. But I really don't think we should take anything away from England's performance or the performance of anyone against them either. Hungary, again, just punching way above their weight with that. Because although obviously Germany aren't necessarily working or hadn't this tournament, it's still a big team full of vastly experienced players in Müller and brilliant youngsters like Havertz. And so to beat them, I mean, it's special, isn't it?
It definitely is. And to say that Joachim Löw's final Germany game as manager will be that defeat to England certainly puts a little smile on his faces. Obviously, scratch and sniff overall in the last few tournaments. But Josh, how would you assess his overall time in charge of the national team?
I think it's a positive. I obviously you got the World Cup win, and yes, he does like to scratch the midriff, but that doesn't take away from his abilities. Obviously, the fashion in which he's bowed out isn't great. It's going to leave a sour taste, but yeah, overall, he's been very good for Germany, and I think with Hansi Flick coming in as well, they're just going to go up. It's only going to get better from here.
It's a transitional phase for Germany, really, and Lowe went back on himself, really, at the start of the tournament, bringing back in Mats Hummels and Thomas Müller, who he demoted after that very poor World Cup that they had in 2018, and I think that might have unsettled the team a little bit in the end coming into this one. But like Josh mentions, they've got so much talent still, especially in that midfield. Kimmich and Goretzka and Havertz, who had a pretty good tournament, to be fair. So, and an excellent coach in Hansi Flick coming in, who knows a lot of the players, with a lot of the Bayern players being in the team. So I think they will be back. I mean, it's Germany. They're a huge force in international football and always have been. So it won't be too long for them out of the limelight.
Before we talk about England and previewing that quarterfinal, I think England's just going to stop, isn't it, for that game in Rome. But Sweden 1, Ukraine 2. We've gone against the format there from the introduction of the games to do it. But it was, even though that England will play Ukraine, Sweden certainly stood out more from the off, didn't they, Sam?
Yeah, well, sort of. I think the change, like I've mentioned already, the back three has been a very popular formation in this tournament, and Ukraine went with that for this game, and that ended up working really well for them, especially in terms of Zinchenko, who had a fantastic game with that brilliant first goal, and then setting up the winning goal. deep into extra time. So that worked for them, for a team that, you know, didn't pull off any trees in the group stage. They were fourth in the best third place teams, and nobody expected them to do much with a negative goal difference as well coming into this game. So Sweden having topped their group as well. So there's a lot of debate over whether the red card was a red card. It was obviously a very dangerous challenge, but there was debate whether he had to go for the ball, and he went for the ball and got the ball in the end. But that was obviously the changing factor. But a good performance from Ukraine, and that change in shape, like I mentioned, was the key for them.
Yeah, Harry mentioned it there. Red card or no red card?
I think in this day and age, it's got to be a red card. I know he's got to go for the ball, but how high he was, and I know it doesn't change the colour of the card, but the way his leg went in the replay was, you know, I don't like how many replays they showed of it. It didn't make me feel very well. But like I said, it's the changing. It changed the game completely. And I was sort of looking at the game, and I was thinking, whoever we play against, it felt like there was an injury every 5 minutes, or yellow cards getting flashed it up. But there were so many injuries, so many people going down, that, especially because they've played 120 minutes of football, we've had an extra day or extra 3 hours ish rest. So that doesn't really make a difference whatsoever, really. But the amount of injuries they had, extra minutes they've played, it could really make a big difference in this next game.
Before we move on then to them quarters, Sam, before in the interlude, before we pressed record again, you mentioned the tournament format. Obviously, these third place teams are doing pretty good coming into this. What's your thoughts on the overall format? Should we continue it, and how are these third place teams doing?
Well, they're doing very well. It's not necessarily that side of it that I have a huge problem with. I probably wasn't feeling too great about it coming into the tournament, but like you say, they've done very well in the end. Some of those teams that have come through third. It's more just this tournament in particular, obviously being all over the place. I think it's given a sort of unfair advantage to some teams, England in particular over others, with some teams having to travel all over the place, like Wales, and other teams playing all the group games at home. So that's not really what you want. You want fair competition in the end, and that's not helping towards that. So I wouldn't like to see us revisit this sort of style of it being all over the place. It's obviously going to be in Germany next time, which is good. So I'd like to stick with that.
I'd also like to get rid of the third place rule with the third place teams coming forward. It's wrong. I really, really don't like it. Add some more teams to the tournament and just have the top two go through. Like, obviously, you got Ukraine who are doing well, but Ukraine have got to the knockout stages of a major tournament with a negative goal difference. Like, that's so wrong in my books. And like the group of death, as it turned out, wasn't really a group of death, just simply because it was a foregone conclusion. Well, yeah, they're all out now, but it was a foregone conclusion. Obviously, it panned out a lot closer than everyone thought. End of the day, Hungary were out. As soon as the groups were announced, everyone said, well, Hungary, they're going to be out. And lo and behold, it happened. And it just, that sort of elimination just doesn't work for me, because we'd be missing one of the big teams. And that's a lot more exciting and lends itself a lot more to tournament football.
Gets rid of the intrigue a little bit, like you say, on the final group game with 3 of the 4 teams potentially going through. It does get rid of the tension a little bit.
Yeah, I suppose you lose the jeopardy. Obviously, you look at the stories on the back of this, and they're absolutely brilliant. I mean, you think of the Ukrainians, how they're going to tell this the story of how their team lost a couple of games but still went through to the quarters. But I agree with Sam. I know George has been critical of that as well, so I will take his word and bring it out in my own. With that aspect, Josh, I think Sam talking about teams not being favourable. Obviously, with England staying all at Wembley, bar this game, obviously it's been playing in Rome, how can Ukraine challenge England?
They've got to hit us hard and fast, I think. Obviously, we got Stones and Maguire at centre-back. They do a great job. They're very good in the air. If they keep it on the carpet and move it quickly, which Zinchenko can do, and of course he turned up for the first time, really, in the game against Sweden after a pretty poor group stage. If they can work it around quickly, I think that might cause issue. Obviously, we'll have the wingers, whoever they may be come the day, coming back to help, and they're obviously quick. But they just need to work the ball around quickly. And I think if they go ahead early, we won't have the fans there to, bolster us. So that'll be big if they can score early on.
Sam, obviously, we know the celebrations and it's coming home and all that, and obviously the questionable voice notes I left in the group chat after we won and celebrating all that. How important is it that England do not get carried away and already think that they are in the semi-finals, pretty much like France thought that they were in the quarters?
Well, you said it there. Just look at some of the other games that have taken place in this knockout stage already. Nobody can be underestimated. But as we've said already, the Sweden game they just had would have taken a lot out of Ukraine, and I think we have to go in and be the dominant team. I'd like us to go back to the back four and get one more player in the attack just to help us create more, because at stages in the group stage, obviously we struggled in that aspect. So I want to see us use our attacking players in this game and put them to the sword. So we should still view ourselves as the favourites, as the big team, and go for it. But like I say, we can't take any team lightly in this tournament.
Saying that overall though, Harry, I suppose Southgate's helped change that boisterous mentality. He sort of brought the supporters closer to the team, and the team seem to be in a different light now.
Most certainly, you look at, I think it was Rio Ferdinand talking about way back when, especially when, me and Sam, really all of us started watching the 08s, the 10s, the 12s. The players seem disconnected from each other. It's like, if you're playing for one of these teams, you stay in that group, that team, that group. Whereas in this group, it seems like everyone is genuinely together. Everyone genuinely enjoys each other's company. And it shows on the pitch with the results. We're not slipping up against teams that we should be beating. And we're doing well against teams that, we may not be favourites. Or maybe this tournament, you could have just sneaked us against Germany. But I think it's as 50-50 as anyone really could have said. So don't get me wrong, the fans, it's going to be a big disadvantage, especially because the first 4 games we have all been at Wembley, and it's going to be difficult. But Ukraine will set up in a similar way to Scotland. I think they'll be defensively solid, or as solid as they can be, and try, like exactly how Josh said, try and play it quick on the counter attack and see if they can sneak a goal like Scotland probably should have done. But we should win. We really should win against this Ukraine side.
I'll just add to Harry's point about the togetherness of the team. I think off the pitch it's huge as well. Because culturally, that win against Germany, that's one of the biggest in my lifetime. So it's come at a time where the country's completely polarised by things like Brexit and the handling of the pandemic. And then you've got this one thing in common, the football team, and they're playing at Wembley. They're doing well in a tournament which they're gradually becoming favourites of, and they're beating our old rivals. So just culturally, as a country, it's just bringing us out. Everyone's coming together, and so if we can get through this stage in Rome, I believe that the semi-final and the final both at Wembley, and to have those two at home with more and more fans coming in, because I think it's going to be 60,000 for the semi-final. I'm not sure about the final. With more and more fans coming in and a country together behind a team that's together, you've got to fancy us.
The fan aspect is certainly boosts everything, doesn't it? I mean, we saw how wild, and we've not been able to have any sort of limbs there, to use the term, to get anyone behind the country, just down to what we've had, the pandemic, and it was sort of like a relief. And we've already shown that we can adapt to different sides. We can obviously Southgate set to set it up, but it's going to be an interesting to do these predictions. Rightio, let's try and put something down on here, either make ourselves look absolutely brilliant or our pants have been pulled down. Sam?
That's already happened.
Well, Ukraine or England?
I've got to go with the boys now. No, I've got to go with Ukraine now. It's like we've said already, it's going to be a bit different for the team not playing at Wembley, but it's only fair, I guess, considering we've had all 4 of our games at Wembley so far. So, like I said already as well, Ukraine, they would have had a lot taken out of them from that Sweden game. I'd like to see us go more attacking, bring Grealish in from the start, maybe bring in someone like Sancho or Rashford, give them a run out and show off our attacking talent a bit more. And hopefully we'll do, and hopefully we'll win 3-1.
Haroldinho?
I think we're going to win 2-0. I think Ukraine will start the better off. I think the first 10 minutes, they're going to get really, like, when you're the underdog, you come out the traps firing. And I think the first 10 minutes, they'll probably be the better side. But I think for the rest of the 80 minutes, I think we'll dominate. Similar to what Sam said, give the players that haven't played yet, even if they come off the bench at half time, hopefully by that time we'll be in the lead. But Sancho needs some minutes. Maybe he's not played because of all the Manchester United transfer rumours. We don't know. We don't know what goes on behind the scenes. But yeah, I'm going to say 2-0. And I'm also going to say if we lose this game, it's going to be worse than when we lost to Iceland, because I think we have genuine hope and expectation of winning this tournament. And I think if we lose at this point to a team that is, I would debate the easiest, not the easiest game, but one of the easier games of the tournament. I think Scotland's, they're similar levels. I think it's going to be absolutely horrendous. So I'm going to stay optimistic and I'm going to say 2-0 with that little caveat on the side as well.
Do you not think that obviously playing a lot of players that haven't played yet sort of kind of goes what I was saying about the mentality of the English?
I don't know. I don't think a lot of changes should be made. I think if there's a lot of tired legs out there, I think, only 1 or 2 changes really. I think we're changing quality players or quality players. I was listening to Talksport this morning. If you think about it, we've got Jadon Sancho and Grealish on the bench who are worth up to £170 million each. We're not taking out bad players. Yes, we don't really know who's going to take out. Maybe we take out Saka or Sancho or something like that. But I think as long as you don't make too many changes, and you also got to give the quality players, you've got to give them minutes, And I think without disrupting the harmony of the squads, I think you can bring those players in and have equal results. Like if you look at Southgate, he said at the start of the tournament, for each individual game, he will pick a different team depending on what's required. And if those players are required, great. If they're not, keep the same team. I'm now, because we beat Germany, whatever he picks, I'm going to be satisfied with, and I'm going to be satisfied with his mindset behind it. But I do want to see these different players playing as well.
Goodman Park, to put a spin on the Everton there. What's your prediction?
3-0 England. We'll keep our clean sheet run going. And I think we'll brush them off fairly easily. We've played them 7 times in the past, conceded only 3. And so I don't think they're going to be causing us any real issues. And I mean, we're on it at the moment. We're going to win the tournament. It is coming home, quite simply.
He said it. He said the 3 words.
He said that.
I mean, it's hard not to get excited in it when this is happening. And so to draw it to a close, I do think it won't be as straightforward. I think the Ukraine are sort of quite boisterous defensively, if that's the right term. They're a bit like when Russia in 2018, they were quite strong. But I think it's just going to be a comprehensive, like last time in 2018 when we beat Sweden 2-0, I think it'll just be something like that. Couple of goals, obviously clean sheet going forward. I'm going to go for Ukraine 0, England 2. Hopefully we're coming on this podcast and on when is the next ones? It's over this weekend, isn't it? So hopefully early next week when we record the next podcast, we'll all be sat here with smiles. Sam will still have his flag. George will have his flag. But filling in today, Josh, thank you for coming on. Hope you've enjoyed it.
Oh, brilliant, lads. Thank you very much for having me. My pleasure.
Thanks, sir.
Anytime.
And if anyone wants to, want some Works Up Town news, they want some Derbyshire cricket, Vavel articles, fantastic. Where can they find you?
Twitter.com/J Goodman online, and you'll find me there.
I was at the start of the video anyway, as we always do.
Yep. Hopefully, well, if you're still around here and you're not only George watching, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at _Fourmation. We're also on Facebook.
TikTok.
And we're on
Facebook as well.
TikTok as well.
We're
We've
everywhere.
got-
We're Mr. Worldwide. Or Mr.
We have various outlets. Obviously, TikTok has been one that we've been really enjoying, haven't we, Sam, with our explainers?
Yeah, been good. Make sure you pay attention to the games a bit more instead of just watching them passively like you sometimes do. So that has been good for us to do. Another outlet for us. And
hopefully my Yorkshire twang hasn't made everyone's ears bleed or you click off after 2 seconds. But overall, George will be back next week and we will see you later for episode 37.
Goodbye.